Okay, I'm gonna ask Doug Borland. Doug, where are you? Doug was a past president from Alaska and led PBS into the 80s. We're gonna split this thing into decades a little bit, and Doug's gonna come up here and talk a little bit about the 80s. So here we go. Take it away, Doug.
Thank you, Gene, and I am honored to be here and to be chosen to talk a little bit about the decade of the 80s. Probably more in spite of me than because of me. The 80s was a time of growth and financial stability for PBS. We grew to over 500 or close to 500 regulars and about 1,500 irregulars, associates. And the decade started with Jack Smith from North Carolina as president, and Lee Stone from right here in Oregon was vice president. The decade ended with Fred Richter from West Virginia as president, and Jay Massey from Alaska as vice president, and Oregon's own Vern Struble was senior councilman, and I really wish Vern was here. I joined in 1974, I'm going to say, and Vern was instrumental in me getting involved with PBS. In between the Jack and Fred, we had a lot of fun, and we had the ruminations of a much younger and thinner G. Fred Asbell. He was also quite a bit more radical at the time. We had the gospel according to Gene and Barry Wenzel, the Rambling Rednecks, and we had to counteract that with the Chaplain's Corner in the magazine to just sort of balance that out. And so I was honored when Larry called me and said that we'd like to have you talk about the 80s when you were involved. And Larry also said we're going to have a script, and those of you that know me, that I tend to not follow scripts very well, and I'm a bit of a loose cannon, so if I get off script a little bit, I apologize in advance. The 80s were also a time when we established the first permanent home office for PBS and actually hired Jack Smith and Brenda as our administrative help, and they have been overworked and underpaid ever since, and we have to thank them dearly for that. But that was a big step forward. It was also the time that we started the Conservation Committee, and through our growth in numbers and some financial freedom, we were able to establish a Conservation Committee and start funding worthwhile causes, scholarships, habitat restoration, and that was a real beneficial step forward for our public image and widely supported by our PBS members. Also in the 80s, we established an affiliation program that I think we should resurrect. We used to have affiliations with regional directors and regional bow hunting organizations, and those affiliations kept us in touch with the regional issues that were sometimes much different than the national issues that were going on. We also started a sustaining membership in which our commercial supporters and sponsors could show their appreciation, and we could return that appreciation by recommending and supporting their products. And I remember M.R. James and Bowhunter Magazine becoming our very first commercial sustaining member. Of course, that was also the decade of our first biannual banquet. And Gene mentioned that this was the 14th, and I hope I'm around for the 28th or further. But that first banquet was in Deer Park in Ohio, and we had over 500 enthusiastic PBS members and guests. It was my first time to get to know and get acquainted with a lot of our Eastern members, and I was delighted at all of them. I can remember then as now being in awe of the craftsmanship and the products, the vendors, the bows, the arrows, the knives, the art. I said, who are these people with this skill and this ability? And I said, these people stand out, and I am impressed. I still am. Also in the 80s, we did our first, and I think only, PBS hunting annual. We published an annual that featured PBS writers, people like Mark Klinke and Fred Asbell and the Wenzels and John Rook and Jay Massey, and that was a fun project. We have one of those in the Saturday night auction tonight. If you don't have one, or you don't know how to maybe get a hold of one, so bid on that. It was also not just fun and fraternity in the 80s as it is now. We had some serious issues that PBS addressed, and PBS took the lead in fighting the crossbow as a legitimate weapon in bow seasons. And what did I say? Okay. Oh. Exactly. And concerned members like Joel Riotto in Pennsylvania and Fred Richter and Tim Reed. Crossbow wasn't really an issue in the West at that time, but it was an issue in the East. And those people came to us and said, we need some ammunition to fight this. And Roy Marlowe from Texas did a professional study, and we did take the lead on that, even though it's been a rough battle. We're still doing it. We also, the council at that time passed a resolution condemning the use of electronics on a bow or arrow. And at that time, the proliferation of modern gadgetry on the bow was becoming apparent, and we felt that we need to draw a line in the sand. And so we were the first to do that, and later Pope and Young adapted that, and several other state organizations went that exact same route. Also in the 80s was the advent of Traditional Bowhunter magazine, and I thank TJ and Larry. There was a tremendous amount of support from the founders, the owners, the editors of Traditional Bowhunter were and have always been major supporters of PBS, and we can't thank them enough. And they started up in that same era. Finally, we had the first Western banquet. We decided that we need to move these biennial banquets around, and so we went to Grand Junction, Colorado. I forget the year, it must have been 88 maybe. And that was our first Western banquet, done with some trepidation that we would get an attendance because we didn't have many members in Colorado or the West, but it was well attended, very well attended. It opened our eyes to the support that we could get from our members. The Saturday night auction blew us away at Grand Junction. We said, whoa, these people are dedicated and passionate, and they will support this organization, which of course they continue to do today. We also had a lot of debate and discussion, as we still do, regarding equipment and whether PBS should be a traditional only organization and we should be the political standard bearer and tackle all of the political issues having to do with traditional versus mechanical, what I call arrow flinging devices. And we decided that no, we didn't need to do that. That we were what we were, and it wasn't determined by equipment. That our philosophy was really what counted and what we stood for. And as a family and a fraternity, we stand for the highest ethics in the field. We stand for skill. We stand for woodsmanship. And I think that's really enough. And let the other side come to us. I think we have something to offer. We had something to offer in the 80s, and we still do. And I am honored to have spent 38 years in PBS, and I hope that I will see it continue to grow and flourish.